Hello and welcome to a brand new way of looking at your English journey. I'm so happy you decided to spend this time with me today. You're here because you want to learn English fast, and I'm here to tell you that it's absolutely possible. But we have to be honest with each other right from the start. Fast doesn't mean magic. Fast doesn't mean you wake up speaking fluently after 7 days without any effort. Fast means you stop wasting time on methods that don't work, and you focus all your energy on the ones that do. Think about it this way. If you were driving to a destination and you realized you were going the wrong way, would you keep driving? Of course not. You would turn around and find the right route. That's exactly what we're doing today. We're looking at your current route and we're making sure it's the fastest one possible. I've been teaching English for over 2 decades, and in that time, I've seen thousands of students. The ones who improve rapidly all have one thing in common. They don't treat English like a subject in school. They treat it like a tool for communication. That shift in mindset is everything. So let's begin by talking about the biggest lie that most English learners believe. The biggest lie is that you need to understand every single word before you can understand the general meaning. That is completely false. Imagine you're listening to someone speak your native language. Do you catch every single word they say? Of course not. You catch the key words. You read the body language. You understand the context, and your brain fills in the blanks. You need to give your brain permission to do the same thing in English. When you focus too much on every individual word, you slow yourself down to a painful crawl. You lose the flow of the conversation, and you get lost in the details. Fast learners understand that language is about chunks, not individual words. That's a huge key that we'll come back to again and again. Now let's talk about your daily routine. Most learners I meet study for hours but make almost no progress. Why is that? Because they're studying in a way that doesn't stick. They write vocabulary lists and try to memorize translations. They study grammar rules like they're preparing for a test. Then when they try to speak, everything they've studied disappears. That's because those methods are passive. Your brain isn't built to memorize lists of isolated words. Your brain is built to remember stories, emotions, and connections. So the first rule of learning English fast is to stop studying isolated words. Instead, learn phrases. Learn complete sentences. Learn expressions that native speakers actually use in real life. For example, don't just memorize the word grateful. Learn the whole phrase, "I'm so grateful for your help." Now you have a ready-made piece of language that you can use immediately. You have the grammar built in. You have the pronunciation pattern. And you have the social context all in one neat package. This is how native speakers learn their own language. They don't sit down with grammar books when they're 3 years old. They listen, they imitate, they make mistakes, and they gradually figure out what works. You can do the same thing. You just need the right input and the right practice. Let's talk about input for a moment. Input is everything you hear and read in English. If you want to learn fast, you need to flood your brain with high-quality input every single day. But here's the catch. That input needs to be comprehensible. That means you need to understand at least 70 to 80% of it. If it's too hard, your brain will just tune out and you won't learn anything. If it's too easy, you won't learn anything new. You need to find that sweet spot where you're challenged but not overwhelmed. So what does that look like in practice? If you're a beginner, don't try to watch the news or listen to advanced podcasts. That's a recipe for frustration. Watch simple videos where people speak clearly and slowly. Watch children's shows or content designed for language learners. Listen to podcasts for learners. Read articles or stories that are slightly above your current level but not impossible. As you get better, you gradually increase the difficulty. This is called graded exposure, and it's one of the most effective ways to improve quickly. Now let's move on to output. Output is everything you say and write in English. Many learners focus only on input because they're shy or afraid of making mistakes. But you cannot learn to speak without speaking. You cannot learn to write without writing. It's like learning to play the piano by only watching other people play. You might understand the theory, but your fingers won't know where to go. You have to make a mess. You have to make mistakes. You have to sound awkward sometimes. That is part of the process, and it is completely okay. Native speakers don't judge you as harshly as you think they do. They appreciate that you're trying. They appreciate the effort. So give yourself permission to be imperfect. Give yourself permission to sound like a learner. That is the fastest path to sounding like a native speaker one day. Now let me tell you a story that might change the way you think about learning. I once had a student who was a brilliant engineer. He was incredibly smart and detail-oriented. But when he spoke English, he was completely frozen. He would think for what felt like an eternity before saying anything. He wanted every sentence to be perfect. He wanted to make sure he had the right grammar, the right vocabulary, and the right pronunciation. And his speaking was painfully slow. One day I asked him a question. I asked him if he checked every single bolt and screw with a magnifying glass when he was building something. He laughed and said no. He said he trusted his training and his instincts. So I told him to do the same thing with English. Trust his training. Trust his instincts. Speak without overthinking. It took him a while, but he finally started letting go. He started making mistakes, but he also started speaking much more fluently. And you know what happened? People understood him better because he was actually communicating instead of just trying to be perfect. So that's a powerful lesson for all of us. Communication is the goal, not perfection. Now let's talk about listening comprehension. This is one of the biggest challenges for learners, and it's completely understandable. Native speakers speak fast. They link words together. They drop sounds. They use slang. They use idioms. It can sound like a totally different language sometimes. But there are ways to train your ear. The first way is to listen to the same content multiple times. The first time you listen, you might understand very little. The second time, you pick up a little more. The third time, you start to hear where words are linked. The fourth time, it starts to feel much more natural. I recommend listening to short audio clips, like a 1-minute news story or a short dialogue. Listen to it once without any subtitles. Listen to it again with subtitles. Listen to it a third time without subtitles, and see how much more you understand. This is called active listening, and it is incredibly powerful. Another great technique is shadowing. Shadowing means repeating what you hear as quickly as possible, even if you're mumbling. You're following the rhythm and the intonation of the native speaker. This trains your mouth to produce the sounds of English in a natural way. It also helps you internalize the stress and rhythm patterns of the language. Do this for just 5 minutes a day, and you'll notice a huge difference in your speaking and listening skills. Now let's discuss the role of grammar. I know many learners are obsessed with grammar. They think they need to master every tense and every rule before they can speak. But native speakers don't think about grammar rules when they talk. They don't say to themselves, "Oh, I need to use the present perfect here because the action started in the past and continues to the present." They just say what feels right. And how do they know what feels right? Because they've heard it 1,000 times before. So instead of studying grammar rules, study patterns. Notice how native speakers put sentences together. Notice what comes before and after certain words. For example, you'll notice that native speakers often say, "I've been," instead of "I have been. They say, "I'm gonna," instead of "I'm going to. They say, "wanna," instead of "want to." These are not mistakes. These are natural reductions that make speech faster and more fluid. When you learn these patterns, your speech becomes much more natural. One of the best ways to do this is to use a technique called sentence mining. Sentence mining means collecting sentences from content you consume. If you're watching a show and you hear a sentence you like, write it down. If you're reading an article and you see a phrase you want to remember, write it down. Build a collection of real sentences that you can study and review. These sentences are your raw material. They are the building blocks of your English. When you review them, don't just read them. Say them out loud. Imagine yourself saying them in a conversation. Practice the rhythm and the intonation. This is the fastest way to turn passive knowledge into active skill. Now let's talk about how to find time to practice. I know you're busy. We all are. You have work, you have family, you have responsibilities. But the key to learning English fast is not to find more time. It's to use the time you already have more effectively. For example, you probably spend a lot of time commuting. That's a perfect opportunity to practice listening. Put on a podcast or an audiobook while you're driving or taking the train. You probably spend a lot of time doing chores around the house. That's a perfect opportunity to speak out loud. Practice your shadowing while you're washing the dishes or folding laundry. You probably spend a lot of time scrolling through social media. That's a perfect opportunity to read something in English. Even 5 or 10 minutes a day adds up to a lot over time. The secret is consistency. It is much better to practice for 10 minutes every day than to practice for 3 hours once a week. Your brain needs daily exposure to build new connections. Think of it like going to the gym. You wouldn't work out for 8 hours on a Sunday and then do nothing for the rest of the week and expect to get stronger. You need consistent exercise to build muscle. The same is true for language. Consistent daily practice builds fluency. Now let's address the fear of speaking. I know it's real. I've seen it in students of all ages and all backgrounds. They freeze up when they have to speak to a native speaker. They worry that they won't be understood. They worry that they'll sound foolish. But here's the thing. The best way to overcome that fear is to face it directly. Start with low-stakes situations. Talk to yourself in English. Narrate what you're doing. Describe the room you're in. Tell yourself what you're going to do today. This gets you comfortable producing the sounds of English without any pressure. Then find a language exchange partner. There are many apps and websites where you can practice with someone who is learning your language. You help them. They help you. It's a safe environment where everyone is in the same boat. Then, when you feel more confident, find opportunities to speak with native speakers. This could be in person or online. The more you do it, the less scary it becomes. And remember, every native speaker you meet has been in your shoes at some point. They have learned a second language too. They understand the struggle. They appreciate your courage. Now let's talk about a technique that will supercharge your learning. It's called the 5-step method. Step 1 is exposure. You listen to or read something in English. Step 2 is understanding. You make sure you understand the meaning. Look up words you don't know. Step 3 is repetition. You listen to or read it again multiple times. Step 4 is imitation. You repeat it out loud, trying to match the pronunciation and rhythm. Step 5 is creation. You create your own sentences using the new words and patterns you've learned. This takes you from passive understanding to active production. It's the most complete way to learn. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. Imagine you hear a sentence like, "That's a great idea." You understand it means you like someone's suggestion. You repeat it out loud. Then you create your own variations. "That's a wonderful idea." "That's a brilliant idea." "That's a terrible idea." "That's not a bad idea." Now you have a whole family of sentences you can use in real conversations. This method works for every aspect of language learning. It works for vocabulary, for grammar, for pronunciation, and for listening comprehension. Now let's address something very important. Your mindset. Your mindset is absolutely critical to your success. If you believe you're bad at languages, you will be bad at languages. If you believe you can learn, you will learn. It's not just positive thinking. There's actual science behind this. Your brain is plastic. It changes and adapts based on what you do with it. The more you practice, the stronger the neural pathways become. So every time you say, "I can't speak English," you're reinforcing that belief. Instead, tell yourself, "I'm still learning, but I'm getting better every day." That small shift in language changes everything. It takes the pressure off and gives you room to grow. Now let's talk about how to measure your progress. A lot of learners get discouraged because they don't see immediate results. They compare themselves to others who seem much more advanced. But the only person you should compare yourself to is you. Look back at where you were a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago. I guarantee you've made progress, even if it doesn't feel like it. Maybe you can understand more of what you hear. Maybe you can speak a little more confidently. Maybe you can read a little faster. These are all signs of improvement. Celebrate them. Acknowledge them. That is what will keep you motivated for the long haul. Now I want to give you some tips that are often overlooked but incredibly effective. First, learn in context. Don't study words in isolation. Words don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in relationships with other words. For example, the word run can mean many different things depending on the context. You can run a business, run a race, run a test, run out of time, run into someone. Each of these is a completely different meaning. If you only learn the word run in isolation, you're missing the vast majority of how it's actually used. That's why phrases and sentences are so much more useful than individual words. Second, focus on high-frequency language. Not all words are equally important. Research shows that the most common 1,000 words in English account for about 80% of everyday conversation. That's a very small number of words. If you master those high-frequency words and phrases, you can communicate effectively in most situations. Don't waste your time on obscure vocabulary that you'll never use. Focus on language that's useful for your life. Third, learn to use fillers. Fillers are words like well, you know, actually, basically, and like. Native speakers use them all the time. They give you time to think, and they make your speech sound much more natural. If you use these fillers, you'll sound less like a robot and more like a real person. For example, instead of saying, "I need to go," you can say, "Well, I actually need to go now." It's so simple, but it makes a world of difference. Fourth, use natural pauses and intonation. English has a musical quality. It has stress and rhythm. When you speak in a monotone, it's hard to listen to and hard to understand. But when you stress the right words and use natural intonation, your speech comes alive. Listen to how native speakers emphasize certain words and how their voice goes up and down. That is the music of the language. Try to imitate it, even if it feels a little strange at first. Fifth, record yourself speaking. This might feel awkward, but it's one of the best ways to improve. When you listen back, you'll hear things you didn't notice when you were speaking. You'll hear where you need to improve your pronunciation. You'll hear where you need to slow down. You'll hear where you need to add more expression. Then you can practice again and make it better. This is the feedback loop that accelerates learning. Now let's talk about the importance of enjoying the process. If learning English feels like a chore, you won't stick with it. You'll find excuses to avoid it. So find ways to make it fun. Watch movies that you love. Listen to music that you enjoy. Read books or articles that interest you. Talk about topics that you're passionate about. When you connect English to things you already love, it becomes a pleasure, not a burden. That's when the magic happens. That's when you start learning without even realizing it. I want you to think about what you're doing right now. You're watching a video in English. You're listening to me speak. You're understanding at least some of what I'm saying. That is already a success. That is already progress. Acknowledge that. Be proud of that. Now let's talk about how to use technology to your advantage. There are so many amazing resources available today that didn't exist when I started teaching. You have podcasts, apps, YouTube, language exchange platforms, and AI tutors. You can access authentic content from anywhere in the world. You can hear native accents from the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and many more. You have all the tools you need at your fingertips. The challenge is not finding resources. The challenge is choosing the right ones and using them effectively. So pick a few resources that you enjoy and commit to using them daily. Don't spend hours searching for the perfect app. Spend your time actually practicing. A good resource that you use is infinitely more valuable than a perfect resource that you don't use. Now let me answer a question that many of you have. How long will it take to become fluent? The honest answer is that it depends. It depends on your starting level, how much time you practice, how you practice, and your personal learning style. But here's what I can tell you. If you practice consistently every day, you will see noticeable improvement in a matter of weeks. In 3 to 6 months, you can have a basic conversation with some confidence. In a year or two, you can become quite fluent. But don't get too caught up in the timeline. This isn't a race. This is your journey. The most important thing is to keep moving forward. Even when it's hard, even when you don't see immediate results, keep going. Every minute you spend with English is a minute you're getting better. And there's something else I want to mention. Language learning is not a straight line. You'll have good days and bad days. Some days everything will feel easy and natural. Other days you'll feel like you can't get anything right. That's completely normal. When you hit those bad days, don't get discouraged. Just take a break, come back the next day, and keep going. Consistency beats intensity over the long term. Now let's talk about a mistake that almost every beginner makes. They try to translate everything in their head. They hear a sentence in English. They translate it into their native language. They process the meaning. Then they try to think of a response in their native language. And finally, they translate that response into English. That's a huge bottleneck. It's slow, it's tiring, and it's not how fluency works. Fluency happens when you can think directly in English. When the words come out without going through a translation filter first. How do you achieve that? By practicing enough that the patterns become automatic. By hearing and using the language so much that it starts to feel intuitive. One exercise to help with this is to spend a few minutes every day thinking in English. Just narrate your thoughts. I'm waking up now. I'm going to make coffee. I have a busy day ahead. It might feel forced at first, but it will become more natural over time. This trains your brain to process English without translation. Another powerful technique is to describe things around you in English. Look at an object and describe it. What color is it? What shape is it? What is it used for? This activates your vocabulary and forces you to think in English. Now let's talk about the language of emotions. One of the most important aspects of communication that learners often forget is expressing how you feel. Native speakers use emotional language all the time. They say, "I'm so happy. I'm really frustrated. I'm absolutely exhausted." These emotional expressions add color to your speech and make you sound more human. So learn to express your feelings. Learn phrases like, "I'm thrilled," "I'm disappointed," "I'm overwhelmed," "I'm excited." These are the kinds of phrases that make conversations more meaningful and engaging. And when you're listening to native speakers, pay attention to how they express emotions. Notice the intonation, the emphasis, the words they choose. This will help you sound more natural and connect better with others. Now, I also want to talk about culture. Language and culture are deeply connected. You can't fully understand English without understanding some of the culture behind it. For example, native speakers often use humor in conversation. They use irony and sarcasm. They make jokes. If you take everything literally, you'll miss a lot of the meaning. So it's helpful to consume a wide range of content to get a sense of the culture. Watch sitcoms, listen to comedy podcasts, read blogs from native speakers. This cultural knowledge will make your English more natural and help you avoid misunderstandings. Now let's talk about the power of asking questions. In many classrooms, students are passive. They listen, they take notes, they try to remember. But in real life, communication is interactive. You ask questions, you get information, you build relationships. So practice asking questions. Learn the common question forms. What do you do? Where are you from? How long have you been learning English? Why did you decide to study English? Questions drive conversation. They also help you learn because you're actively engaging with the language. So don't be afraid to ask. Ask questions in your language exchange sessions. Ask questions in your English classes. Ask questions in online forums. The more you ask, the more you learn. Now I want to share a powerful secret about memory. The secret is that memory is built on connections. When you learn a new word or phrase, connect it to something you already know. Connect it to a visual image. Connect it to a feeling. Connect it to a personal experience. For example, if you learn the word adventure, think about a time you went somewhere new. Think about how you felt. Think about what you saw. Now, the word adventure isn't just a word in a book. It's connected to a real memory. That makes it much easier to remember and retrieve later. This is what mnemonics are all about. Creating vivid associations that help you recall information. Use this technique with all your vocabulary. It's one of the most powerful tools you have. Now, there is one more secret that often gets overlooked. It's the power of sleep. Yes, sleep. When you sleep, your brain consolidates everything you learned during the day. It moves information from short-term memory to long-term memory. So if you study or practice before you go to sleep, you're much more likely to remember it the next day. That's why a regular study routine is so important. Study a little bit every day and let your brain do the work while you sleep. It's efficient and effective. Now let's talk about how to stay motivated in the long term. Motivation is not something you have. It's something you create. You create it by setting small, achievable goals. Instead of saying, I want to be fluent, say, I want to learn 20 new phrases this week. Or, I want to have a 5-minute conversation in English by the end of the month. When you achieve these small goals, you feel a sense of accomplishment. That feeling of accomplishment fuels more motivation. It's a positive cycle. So set realistic goals and celebrate when you achieve them. This will keep you going when things get tough. And always remember why you're learning. What is your reason? Is it for work? Is it for travel? Is it to connect with friends or family? Is it to understand movies and books? Keep that reason at the forefront of your mind. When you feel discouraged, remember that reason. It will give you the strength to keep going. Now I want to talk about the importance of making mistakes. Mistakes are not a sign of failure. They are a sign of progress. Every time you make a mistake, you've learned something. You've learned what doesn't work, and that brings you one step closer to what does work. Think about how a baby learns to walk. They fall down over and over again. They don't give up. They keep trying. Eventually they start walking, then running, then jumping. You are that baby. You are learning to walk in English. You will stumble. You will fall. But you will also get up and keep going. That's how you become fluent. So don't fear mistakes. Embrace them. Welcome them. They are your teachers. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment. What if you could become fluent in English in 1 year from today? What would that look like in your life? What opportunities would open up for you? How would your relationships change? How would your career change? How would you feel about yourself? That is the vision you need to hold in your mind. That is the future you're working toward. And it's not a fantasy. It's a real possibility if you're willing to put in the work and use the right methods. So now I want to challenge you. Today, when you finish this video, I want you to take one action. Just one. Maybe you'll listen to a podcast on your way home. Maybe you'll write down 5 new phrases that you want to learn. Maybe you'll practice shadowing for 5 minutes. Maybe you'll talk to yourself in English in the mirror. Whatever it is, do it today. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for a better time. Start right now. That's the secret to making real progress. Take action today and then take action again tomorrow. One step at a time, one day at a time, and before you know it, you'll look back and be amazed at how far you've come. And here's something beautiful to remember. Learning English is a journey, but it's not a journey to a destination. It's a journey that transforms you. It changes how you think, how you connect with others, and how you see the world. It opens doors you didn't even know existed. It makes you a more global, more connected, more empathetic person. So enjoy the process. Appreciate the little victories. Be kind to yourself when you struggle. Keep showing up every day. And trust that you are getting better every single day. You are capable of so much more than you realize. You are stronger than you think, smarter than you believe, and you have everything it takes to achieve your English goals. So, take a deep breath, smile at the challenge ahead, and believe that you can do it. Because you really can. I believe in you, and it's time for you to believe in yourself. Now go out there and start practicing. Your future self will thank you.